Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. It's the 22nd of June and we have our regular Thursday guest, David Kuo, the founder of the Smart Investor out of Singapore. David, as always, good afternoon.
Selamat tengah hari, Brian.
Now, selamat tengah hari, David. Now, today, before we get your insights, we're going to take a look at how markets have performed across the region. We will start, however, with crypto markets. Bitcoin is at 30,304, continuing its rise. It's up 5.3%. Ethereum is at 1,918. It's up 5.72% as well. Now, looking across the regional stock markets, markets in Hong Kong, mainland China, as well as Taiwan are closed for a holiday. So we start close to you, David. The SGX is down 0.18%. Bursa Malaysia is up 0.39%. The ASX All Ordinaries is down 1.55%. The Nikkei is down 0.39%. And rounding up the numbers, we've got the Kospi, which is up 0.39%. So, David, it's a pretty mixed bag among the markets that are open. Please tell us why.
Okay, let's start with Bitcoins, because, that is, as you quite rightly said, on a kind of a tear at the moment. And there are hopes that maybe the regulators in America will allow a ETF to be listed on the US exchange, which will make it easier for people who want to buy that particular cryptocurrency. But as far as the rest of the market is concerned, I think they're still trying to digest what Jerome Powell said yesterday about the direction of interest rates. I have to say, it was a bit of a head scratcher. What exactly did he allude to that was different to when they increased it? Well, when they left interest rates unchanged at the last meeting. And a lot of people are saying we don't fully understand what exactly the FOMC is planning to do. First of all, they put interest rates on hold. And then last night, he came out and said, well, we still have a long way to go and expect higher interest rates. So if people are supposed to be expecting higher interest rates, Brian, why didn't he increase interest rates at the last meeting? Why did he even put things on hold in the first place? Who is he trying to please? I don't think he's pleasing anybody. If anything, he's actually making the situation even more confused.
So, David, then the other thing is, what are your thoughts in terms of now the terminal rates? Because the telegraphing is, as you said, it's a little bit confused, but he did say rates are going to go up again. But what are the expectations of a terminal rate now?
I think there are a couple of things to look at. The first thing that he spoke about yesterday was the economic growth in America. And he said that growth in America must come in below trend in order to control inflation. Now, if you dissect what he's saying, growth has to be below trend before inflation can be brought under control. So effectively, he's saying we're going to have to engineer some kind of recession because otherwise we're not going to be able to control inflation. And he's saying that the American economy is still fairly strong. The employment levels are still relatively robust. And so therefore, two things I think have to happen before we can even start thinking about a terminal rate. First of all, we know that both the headline and the core inflation rates are still fairly strong in America. And particularly the core inflation rate is double the target rate for the Fed. So if he's going to be able to control that inflation rate, he's got to drive down the economy, and he's probably going to have to put more people into unemployment in order for that to happen. As to how far he has to go, he said we have a ways to go yet. And so therefore...
And David, I want to interrupt you at this point because I want to share a startling piece of data that came out yesterday, which sent me into a head spin.
Right.
Housing starts in the US increased 22%. Now, that is an economy that obviously is therefore not hurting from interest rate rises because there's obviously demand. And that telegraphs, that gives me a sense that really the Fed has to be probably a lot more aggressive to curb that sort of exuberance.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And I think that is why people are so confused at the moment. And if we have a look at some of the regional markets that we talked about at the beginning of this show. You look at Singapore. Amongst the winners today in the STI were two of Singapore's biggest banks, so UOB and also DBS. Amongst the losers were the real estate investment trusts. So it's almost as though Singapore investors have accepted the fact that interest rates are going to go up, which will benefit the banks. And of course, it could have an adverse effect on the real estate investment trusts, the REITs, which are very heavily borrowed. And also, people then have a choice. Do I want to stick it into something safe and risk-free, like the Singapore savings bond, or do I actually go out and buy the REITs? So maybe a sign is actually coming from the Singapore investors who are saying that we believe the Fed. But I think in America, they don't actually believe him, and they're challenging him. And they're saying, we don't believe that you're going to be able to increase interest rates this year. And we don't believe that you're going to be able to hold it high enough in order to control inflation, because there are political considerations for you. So there's an economic and a political consideration for the Fed. What do? I don't think Jay Powell wants to go down in history being remembered for the guy that actually drove America into recession. And the same thing in the UK. I don't think anybody in the Bank of England, they'll be having an interest rate decision today, and chances are they're going to have to increase interest rates. And people are already squealing in the UK because they're saying that mortgage payments are now so expensive and house prices are starting to come down. But for some reason, Singapore, house prices still seem to be sort of fairly resilient to what is happening to interest rates. I don't understand that at all.
Now, David, then on a different note, if we go back to the US again, the Prime Minister of India is in the US right now, and the red carpet has been rolled out for Modi. Obviously, they've placed a lot of importance on the Indian relationship, but what's the background around that?
I think they sort of see India as being an economy large enough to influence what is going on over here in Asia and also Southeast Asia. And I think people are beginning to lose some trust in China. I mean, what was interesting was that visit by Anthony Blinken over in China, and they kind of rolled out a mini red carpet for him when he was over there. And he came out and he said, I think we did something fairly constructive. And then lo and behold, we get Joe Biden in America calling Xi Jinping a dictator. And then all the good work that was done by Anthony Blinken was actually undone with one simple word, which was Xi Jinping's a dictator. And maybe what we're actually seeing is this pivot. It's a deliberate pivot by America, trying to pivot away from China and to India. And I think India probably has a lot of potential, a lot of growth potential, and probably growing influence, because many people like India and many people do like the Indians. And they don't seem to be as aggressive or as assertive as the Chinese politicians. So interesting to watch. And I think people need to watch the Indian stock market very closely. And if you get a chance, have a look at some of the Indian shares. I don't think you're going to go too far wrong.
Now, David, final question. We've had Grab just announcing over 1,000 layoffs, but interestingly enough, they were all laid off via email. Now,
terrible, isn't it? Yeah. That? Terrible. I mean, what an awful way. You know, Brian, I have had to lay off workers. When I was working in Hong Kong, we had to shut down a factory, and we had to lay off probably close on to about 100 workers. And do you know what we did? We everybody went out for lunch, and then we told them that there would be a on-site meeting for everybody after lunch, and we called them into the canteen, and senior management stood there, including myself, and we told them that it was unfortunate, but we would be closing down the plant. We had the courage to actually face people and take questions from people face to face, right? We didn't do it in an underhanded way by sending everybody notes and say, don't bother turning up for work tomorrow. We laid everything out right from the outset, why we were doing it, how we're going to be doing it, how they would be affected. And after the meeting, we allowed everybody to leave work paid, and said, go off and go and find a job, right? And your redundancy pays will be sorted out today if you want it, and later on if you can't do it today. That is the way you do things. You treat people like human beings, right? You don't go and send messages onto people's phones and say, don't bother turning up for work today. You don't send emails to people after work. They must think people are stupid, right? We know that there are going to be redundancies. At least have the courage to stand up and talk to these people. I think the human element is sadly missed these days, and we just seem to treat everybody as robots. And as far as Anthony Tan is concerned, blaming the slowdown or blaming the woes of Grab on artificial intelligence, oh my goodness, I mean, what next? I mean, it's not as though he's going to be that affected by artificial intelligence, and so why do you even have to say it? It just doesn't. It sounds really hollow to me, Brian, and I don't think that's the way that you should be doing things. That's my personal take on redundancy.
Now, on that note, David, thank you very much for your opinion.
Before we go, Brian, can we
Yes.
just say a quick prayer for those people who are caught in the submarine over in America? The oxygen is running out fairly shortly, so let's say a quick prayer for them and hope they all come out safe and sound. Yeah.
Yes, let's do that. David, on that note, thank you very much for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We've been speaking to David Kuo, founder of the Smart Investor out of Singapore, on BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez. Check out this show on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and website. Thanks for tuning in.